Hello, church. Here I am with my friend Myron. He's the pastor of intercultural ministries here at E-Free. And on September 30th, Myron, this marks the very first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And this week, actually, we are preaching about reconciliation. So we are entering into a national conversation. And it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, "For God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, no longer counting people's sins against them. And he gave us this wonderful message of reconciliation." So we're entering into this national conversation. Now, the national conversation is really surrounding the federal holiday that is on September 30th here that honors the lost children and survivors of residential schools, their families, the communities that they were a part of, and it's a public commemoration, really, of the tragic and painful history that residential schools played in Canadian history. Now, I've heard, Myron, that this is related to Orange Shirt Day. So, how do these two tie together?
Yeah, Geoff, to understand how they tie together, we really need to understand the origins of Orange Shirt Day. And it grew out of the experience of an Indigenous person named Phyllis Webstad. Back in 1973, when she was about 6 years old, she was excited about the opportunity to go to school. And in preparation for her first day of school, her grandmother bought her a brand new orange shirt. And proudly, she wore this shirt when she went off to school that first day to attend the St. Joseph's Residential School just outside of Williams Lake, BC. But when she arrived, she was stripped and all her clothing was taken away, and she never saw that orange shirt again. And her experience from then on at that school didn't get any better. It was just filled with painful memories. And Phyllis talks about how there were many tears shed and how she just longed to go home. And so the orange shirt represents the experience of Phyllis and thousands of other Indigenous people. And in 2013, the Orange Shirt Day became an official movement. And then in September 30th was chosen because it was a time when trucks and buses would collect children from the local Indigenous communities and transport them off to the residential schools. So this new day of truth and reconciliation, it shares the same intent and it builds on the movement of Orange Shirt Day. It just acknowledges the legacy of these residential schools. It honors those impacted by the schools, and it helps us learn from this history.
So September 30th is coming up here, Myron, but COVID restrictions are kind of limiting the events that can run on that day. What would you suggest for us here that we do on this week's National Day of Truth and Reconciliation?
Well, for this year, it's just obvious. We should start by wearing an orange shirt. And if you don't have one, you know what? I would just encourage people to consider purchasing one, especially where the proceeds are given to support healing and reconciliation, like the ones we're wearing here right now. We're wearing an orange shirt that was made to support a local organization that helps Indigenous people. So wearing an orange shirt is helpful, and it's helpful for 3 reasons. It's a physical reminder that you are committed to this conversation and you have vested interest in this conversation. So when you pull it over your head, you're reminded of that. And when you pull the shirt over your head, it also opens up a conversation with your family and friends, and we get a dialogue going. We're engaged in a conversation. And lastly, it tells our Indigenous neighbors that we care about them, we value them, and we want to support them. Also, in addition to wearing an orange shirt, you might commit yourself to learning a bit more about Indian residential schools and the impact they're having. We want to be more intentional about that in the future, but you can start by just going online. There's lots of resources, and just start learning on your own.
Mm-hmm. And really, Myron, this really reflects our vision, which is to build bridges to our neighbors and the world. And we can do this by reaching out to those in need. We can do this by reaching out to our neighbors. We can do this by engaging conversations and trying to develop relationships with our Indigenous neighbors. And that's what we want to do here as a church. So I have a question for you in your role here. What are we doing long-term to develop relationships and to build bridges, really, with our Indigenous neighbors?
Well, I like the word that you used there, relationships. Reconciliation implies, it assumes relationship. And the best way we can grow in our awareness, and the only way we can gain a depth of understanding, is through relationships with our Indigenous neighbors. Taking time to get to know them, to listen to their stories, to learn about their culture, and to build friendships. And this is what we are committed to here at eFree, and this is what we have been committed to. Our young adults have been leading the way in this, and they've been building understanding and awareness over the last few years through their relationship with Indigenous people in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, as well as with our local Indigenous neighbors. And they've attended bonfires with elders, and they volunteered in supporting different events and activities that they have. And our young adults have extended that invitation to our entire church to be part of this. And last spring, we had a really neat experience where there was a bonfire out of the local reserve here, and over 70 people from our church participated. And it was just a powerful night of hearing firsthand stories of those impacted by residential schools. And so that's what we plan to continue doing, to follow the lead of our young adults and continue to build relationships with our Indigenous neighbors. And so we're going to do that, and we're going to continue to look for opportunities to learn and to grow with them.
Well, thanks for being here with me today, Myron, and helping us to understand this a little more and what we can do and what we are doing. Church, let's continue to build bridges into our neighborhood and the world, because God has created this bridge of love to us.